According to the Kremlin, it seems that Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin have nothing to talk about. According to the press secretary of the Russian dictator, Peskov, additional painstaking work is needed right now. The statement came just in time. It's been only about a week and a half since the White House canceled the leaders' meeting in Budapest, and the US Treasury imposed sanctions on the largest Russian oil companies. But Putin is still passionately talking about some mythical victories on the front lines. Sometimes it seems like the dictator genuinely believes what he's saying. He even invited foreign journalists so they could see with their own eyes the supposed success of the Russian army in Pokrovsk. What alternate universe is the Kremlin leader observing from his bunker, and how do they plan to bring him back to reality? Let's figure it out now. The Russian General Staff keeps assuring Putin that everything is under control and that the front in Ukraine is about to collapse. Another forecast from Gerasimov, the infamous 2 or 3 months. Obviously, the Kremlin leader is satisfied with everything and readily believes his generals. Or he prefers to believe, like, for example, that sanctions are actually beneficial for Russia. And now, the Russian dictator has invited foreign journalists to the front so they can supposedly see the deadlock of Ukrainian forces in Pokrovsk. The thing is, Putin only sees the war on the maps of his general staff, which are just as reliable as Gerasimov's reports. In the area where he's inviting journalists, there aren't even any Russian propagandists. So far, no one has volunteered to play the role of a kamikaze correspondent, but Putin insists.
I discussed this issue with the commanders of the relevant groups. They're not against it. They're not against letting media representatives or correspondents into the enemy's encircled zones. Break time equals 0.5s/foreign journalists and Ukrainian journalists.
Kremlin-appointed leader of the temporarily Russian-occupied territory of Donetsk region, Denis Pushilin, was quick to pick up the Kremlin's fairy tale about the encirclement of Pokrovsk. He released a video claiming to be at the hottest spot on the Pokrovsk front. But the story didn't hold up under scrutiny. Analysts geolocated the footage. It turned out Pushilin was standing in Okaratyne, about 30 kilometers from Pokrovsk.
Russia announces the near-total capture of Pokrovsk. Putin reports about the encirclement and invites journalists. As proof, Pushilin reports from the Pokrovsk side. A small detail, the video was shot 32 kilometers to the east. Julian Rock, military analyst, on social network X.
More and more often, commentators and various analysts agree, Putin is not in control of the situation. In a column for the Sunday Times, Mark Gagliotti notes, the dictator still sees himself as a genius who is always right. Other opinions? They simply don't exist. Those who tried to argue are already in prison or in the grave. So it becomes clear why Pushilin rushed to confirm Putin's myth about the encirclement of Pokrovsk and to stage a trip to the front line. In a system where the leader lives in his own fantasies, everyone has to play along. Otherwise, you're the enemy.
He locked himself in a golden cage. As he got older, he became less energetic, less in tune with his country and his people, and less skilled at controlling the elites. And yet, it was precisely this skill that used to be the foundation of his power. Like many aging autocrats, he has become a caricature of himself. Mark Gagliotti, columnist, in a column for the Sunday Times.
Hearing Putin invite journalists to come and see the imaginary victories of the occupying army, the president of Ukraine commented with irony, if the Russian dictator really wants to personally visit the front, suitcase, train station, Pokrovsk.
Putin says he will go to Pokrovsk. Well, great, if he comes to Pokrovsk. Well, everyone will be applauding. We know how it will all end.
The Russian dictator has long been fascinated by fairy tales about Russia's greatness and eagerly tells them. The further it goes, the more thrilling these stories become. During a visit to a Moscow military hospital, he spoke with a wounded participant in the Russian Federation's war against Ukraine. The man mentioned his grandfather, a World War II veteran, and Putin didn't miss the chance to share yet another of his discoveries, this time in the field of genetics. He claimed that Russians have a genetic predisposition for warfare. He didn't mention any genetic predisposition for living in peace and prosperity.
Here, take a look. I didn't know my grandpa was like that. And you fight just like your grandpa did.
I try to.
Yeah, but what does that tell you? It's in our genes, you see? Putin's statements like this show that the cult of war has now become part of modern Russian identity. The Kremlin systematically promotes the narrative that taking part in wars is a natural part of a true Russian's life. By mythologizing the great victory and the image of grandfathers who fought, they create the belief that new aggressive wars are simply a continuation of a historical mission. This approach turns violence into the norm, and war crimes into an expression of patriotism. From a publication on the website of the Center for Countering Disinformation under the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine.
Meanwhile, talk of peace negotiations is becoming increasingly rare in Russia. Recently, Putin's press secretary Peskov stated that another personal meeting between the Russian dictator and the US president to discuss ending the war makes no sense. This is not surprising since, according to the Financial Times, Trump and Putin, to put it mildly, have very different views. The head of the Kremlin insists on impossible ultimatums and has no intention of acknowledging objective reality. The President of the United States is not satisfied with this position, so the focus now is not on talks, but on applying pressure. The White House is imposing new sanctions, sending weapons to Ukraine, and establishing high-level contacts with Russia's main economic partner, or rather, patron, China.
My meeting with Chairman Xi Jinping of China was wonderful for both our countries. It will lead to everlasting peace and success. May God bless both China and the United States. Donald Trump, President of the United States, on the social network Truth Social.
Analysts believe that Trump's talks with Xi Jinping could be the first, but important, step toward forcing Putin to stop the war against Ukraine. If the US convinces China to reduce its purchases of Russian energy resources, Moscow simply won't have the money to continue the war. According to The Telegraph, China and India are currently importing between 3.5 to 4.5 million barrels of Russian oil per day. A significant portion was supplied by Lukoil and Rosneft, which have come under new US sanctions. After the US deadline, India and China could lose half of their import volume. Indian oil refiners have already started looking for new suppliers and are turning away from Russian crude. Now it's Beijing's turn.
For Trump, this is the right moment to try a different approach in his efforts to achieve a ceasefire, to convince Xi that China's interests would be better served by reducing its partnership with Moscow. Con Coughlin, international columnist, in an article for The Telegraph.
It seems that there are far fewer illusions about Russia in the American information space now, and support for Ukraine among Donald Trump's voters is growing. The Wall Street Journal, citing poll results among Republicans, notes, Ukraine is once again becoming a priority. And the numbers speak for themselves. 64% of respondents believe that it is Putin who is to blame for the fact that a ceasefire is unattainable, and 63% support providing Ukraine with Tomahawk cruise missiles. The actions of the Russian dictator have shown Republicans that the Russian Federation poses a threat. It turns out that Moscow's policy aimed at destabilizing the situation in Europe, buying time, and intimidating the West has failed. Putin was waiting for Kiev's partners to get tired, but instead he got consolidation and increased pressure on Russia.
Subscribe to UATV English and stay updated on the most important events, top news from Ukraine and all over the world, in-depth analysis, exclusive reports and interviews, all on hand in our channel. Join our community of viewers and stay tuned.